Dr. Wink Bennett, if you wouldn't mind, if you can just stand and be recognized. So Dr. Wink Bennett from AFRL. He's also the co-chair of the Next Big Thing committee along with myself. And so it's been our pleasure to try to help put something together that's going to be really engaging for the community. That's going to help our folks of you of common interest to help identify what the future technologies are, how do we adopt it as a community and take full advantage and realize the value of what we can achieve through this and collectively together. So this morning we had one event. There were a series of talks associated at the technical level of XR. You know, we're getting ready to now move into some talks about a little bit more visionary and how can your organizations adopt and as well as accelerate extended realities. And then tomorrow morning we're going to have a panel that's going to look even deeper in the horizon about what are those future technologies that we need to think about and consider to pull into our organizations to help shape for the future. So I'm really looking forward to where we're going with this, but hey, this could not happen without our sponsors, so I just want to quickly recognize the sponsors of this. Epic Games, Design Interactive, Metaverse, Microsoft, Aero Simulations, and finally SAIC. So I'm going to quickly introduce not the panelists but our presenters, because we purposely did not want to do a panel to try to help engage this better. But our presenters are going to quickly tee them up, and then Luke will respectfully reintroduce them as they come up on the stage. But we have Mr. Daniel Robinson, the CEO of Red 6. We have Dr. Will Roper, Advisory Board Member of Red 6. Mr. Dave Rhodes, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Digital Twin at Unity. And Mr. Nathan Thomas, VP of Sales from Unreal Engine, Epic Games. So I got one administrative announcement I think many of you are going to want to take note of. So you all were given one of these tickets here on your way in. Make sure you hold on to it, don't lose it. That's your ticket to get back into the door. At the conclusion of this, they're going to quickly reset this room, turn it into a social. It's going to be your chance, too, to also have an opportunity to have one-on-one conversations, to meet the speakers. Pose your questions there, because our format here is going to be, they're going to go through their talks, and there will not be Q&A, and so the intent is at the end, we'll have the individual Q&A that you may want to have with the individuals on that kind of basis. So without further ado, I'll get off the stage.
Everyone join me in welcoming Daniel Robinson, founder and CEO of Red 6.
Thank you. All right, how's my mic? Everyone hear me? Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for joining me and listening to me for the next 20 or so minutes. I was given the brief not to have too many slides, so I do not, but I do have one video right at the end of this. So if you can bear with me for 20 minutes, there is a little reward right at the end of it. So my name is Dan Robinson. I'm the CEO and founder of Red 6. If you're not aware of what Red 6 does, Red 6 has made a breakthrough in augmented reality technology that for the first time enables it to work outdoors and in the most dynamic environments. And this comes at a great time for us because we are using this breakthrough to solve what I believe is a national security crisis that only augmented reality is capable of solving. That's a big statement, and we'll get into why I think that is as we go through this. It's also a foundational building block for what I believe the future of the metaverse is going to look like. And I think obviously it's quite topical right now given the recent announcements by many of the world's CEOs, not least Mark Zuckerberg, in the conveniently timed rebrand of Facebook to Meta and his stated desire to put billions of dollars into the metaverse over the next 10 years. What we've done, I believe, is a critical component of the metaverse. So we'll level set and we'll talk about the metaverse initially to get us all on the same page, and then I'm going to explain why I think this is the future to solve the problem we're going to talk about. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what is the metaverse? If I ask 100 people in this audience to tell me what the metaverse is, I would guarantee 80% of you wouldn't be able to answer the question. Of the remaining 20, we'd probably get 20 different answers. And that's about normal. So the first thing we'll do is let's get on a common definition of what I think the metaverse is. Well, the first thing is what the metaverse is not. The metaverse is not virtual reality. To say the metaverse is virtual reality is akin to saying that the mobile internet is an app. So we'll strike that. And guess what? Here's the kicker. Even though I'm standing here as the CEO of Red 6, the greatest AR company in the world, unfortunately, sadly for me, it's not AR either. To say it is AR is akin to saying a cell phone is the mobile internet. Matthew Ball, in his now famous set of essays, talks about the architecture of what he believes the metaverse to be. And he says it's a combination of hardware, software, compute, services, a network, APIs, and assets, virtual assets that you can interact with on the move. And that's great. I buy that. That's a good technical architectural outline of what the metaverse is. But what does it actually do? So I'm going to give you Dan Robinson's definition of what I think the metaverse is. Could I grab some water, please? Sorry, forgive me. Just grab me anyone, that's fine. Excuse me, guys. Thank you very much. That's perfect. Thank you. Excuse me. So I believe the metaverse is a ubiquitous layer of metadata that is mobile in nature. That is to say, it goes with us wherever we are. It also offers continuity of experience. That is to say that life inside the metaverse continues whether we are in there or whether we are not inside of it. So it is synchronous and persistent. But I think perhaps the most defining characteristic of how I view the metaverse is that there is data inside the metaverse that is actionable. And if we action data inside the metaverse, then it should have consequences and impact in both the digital world and the real world. So hold that thought as we move forward on what we're going to talk about. Matthew Ball also argues that all digital experiences will be experienced through the metaverse in the future. He also argues that it's going to be a foundational pillar for most physical experiences as well. But perhaps most significantly of all, and the thing I find the most interesting is Matthew argues that the metaverse represents the next great labor platform. And so if we pull on that thread a little bit, I'm going to talk about the metaverse as to how I believe it's a solution for what I think is a crisis in military training, and specifically military flight training, which is what we have set out to solve with Red 6. So what am I talking about in terms of the problem? Well, my own background, I was an RAF guy, 10 years with the Royal Air Force, lucky enough to be the first non-American to fly F-22 Raptors for the US Air Force. And when I came over here, that was tremendous insight into the most capable combat airplane the world has ever known, an extraordinary platform, but also unique insight into some of the limitations, not just associated with that platform, but with the broader combat air force itself. And what I'm talking about is training, or specifically, lack thereof. And so for the non-flyers in the audience to level set, every time a fighter pilot goes up to fly and train, they need someone to go fly and train against. And at scale, capacity, and relevancy, that represents a multi-billion-dollar a year problem that we are failing to solve. We're failing to solve it for three reasons. We haven't got enough pilots. We are 2,000 pilots short on the front line, there or thereabouts. It's hard to find us, hard to train us, and hard to keep us. We need to produce 1,500 pilots a year to maintain the status quo. And correct me if I'm wrong, Moda, but I think we're producing around 1,296 right now to fill that gap. It's compounded by a number of things, a lack of experience in the instructor corps, as we're hemorrhaging pilots, and an aging fleet of airplanes, not least the T-38 as well. So despite the Herculean efforts by the guys at ATC and Det 24, it's a problem that we're struggling to overcome. Secondly, for Red Air, we don't have enough airplanes. In Desert Storm, we had 134 combat squadrons. Right now, 2021, I think we have around 55 combat squadrons. That's a massive problem for us as well. Because even if we had the pilots, we don't have the airplanes to go produce the assets. And so we've now pivoted and starting to use private Red Air contractors. And it may be controversial, I may get myself in trouble, but I believe that represents nothing more than a temporary band-aid at best. It's not how we're going to solve the problem in the long term. And point three, we don't have the dollars. We don't have the dollars to solve point one or point two. And that's a problem for us. But perhaps most critically of all, is even if we had the pilots, the dollars, and the airplanes to solve that problem, two things have happened geopolitically on the world stage in the last 20 to 30 years. We've been involved in conflicts in the Middle East, and whilst that's happened, you've seen the re-emergence of Russia onto the world stage, and nefarious intent as a state actor, not least in the domains of space and cyberspace. and exportation of sophisticated diodes around the globe, which denies entry into airspace. That's a problem. But it pales in comparison to the problems we're seeing with China. And in China, you see astronomical GDP growth over the last 20 years, on average, of 9.23% year on year since 1989 to 2021. And that meteoric rise of GDP growth has facilitated a long-term geopolitical strategy with clearly stated intent. We know exactly what they want to do. Taiwan, South China Seas, it's about energy. But in turn, along with that geopolitical strategy, they've aligned and systematically mobilized an entire defense industrial base. And the defense industrial base, one of the key pillars to that defense industrial base and mobilization, is their embracement of innovation and technology. So much so that in terms of technological innovation, they are starting to eat our lunch in many domains. Why is that happening? In a macro sense, we need to understand what's going on globally with innovation and R&D. In 1960, 70% of R&D in the world happened right here in the United States. 70%. Of that 70%, 30% of that happened right here in the Department of Defense. Fast forward to 2021, about 28% of all R&D is happening in the United States right now. And of that 28%, 3% happens in DoD. So that tells us two things. It tells us the majority of innovation and research and development is happening outside of the United States, about 70%. And of the innovation that's happening inside the United States, it sure as hell isn't happening in the DoD. And I'm going to get myself in trouble again, but I don't think it's happening in the defense primes either. Where is the fast-paced innovation happening? It's happening in the non-traditional defense contractors. Companies like, if I might indulge for just a second, Red 6. And yet we sit as the Department of Defense with an antiquated procurement system, legacy approaches to procurement, and a culture that is so incongruent to capturing new technology and moving quickly that we have almost come to a standstill. And if we've and I'm not going to blame the kernel levels, but it gets stuck in the middle somewhere. So what to do? The good news is there is a solution to this, and the solution does lie in technology and in innovation. And I believe the solution lies in the metaverse. But to build the narrative, allow me to dive into the world of LVC. So LVC has been a topic over the last couple of days that's been at the forefront of everyone's minds. And for the last few years, obviously pioneered by some of the great work with Dr. Bennett and AFRL and the Slate team and Cubic and all of those guys, there's been some massive strides forward in LVC. But LVC is a 50% solution. And to understand why LVC is a 50% solution, let's level set for the non-flyers in the audience as well. LVC, what does it seek to do? Well, it seeks to address the problems I've just described in terms of pilots, airplanes. We can't physically put enough of them up in the sky. So what we try to do with LVC is we put pilots and simulators on the ground, and we beam them up into the air such that the radar systems looking down think there are targets up in the air, and we can prosecute those attacks in a beyond visual range sense. Constructive, same thing, but it's driven by artificial intelligence. So again, these targets are, let's call it, beamed up into the air, so when the pilot looks down at the radar scope, they see these targets and they can prosecute targets on the shoot list. Excuse me 1 second. The problem is, at beyond visual range, it works great. So allow me to describe the role of a fighter pilot. The fighter pilots, beyond visual range, our job is twofold. We're tacticians, we're three-dimensional chess players, and we're marshalling our troops around the sky. And we're taking shots. So let's call these ranges unclassified. We'll call it 100 miles. Here we go, I'm going down 100 miles, I'm taking shots, someone's shooting back at me. As these ranges start collapsing, LVC is working great. And the moment, however, the problem is when we get to 10 nautical miles, the role of the fighter pilot changes. Because we go from tactician, chess player, whatever you want to call it, to you're putting your gum shield in, you're going for the proverbial fist fight. Because at that stage, we start to transition to looking out of the cockpit, visually finding these guys with our own eyeballs and going to a visual fight. And at that point, the entire LVC ecosystem collapses. Why is that? Because so far there's been no way of putting synthetic entities into the field of view of the pilot and having them interact and fly representative of how a real airplane with a real pilot would do so. Why is that? Because so far, augmented reality hasn't worked outdoors or in dynamic environments. Well, guess what? It does now. And that's the problem we've been solving. So the journey started 4 years ago. I happen to have been building an airplane in Santa Monica in a hangar. And I'm not kidding. There's a gentleman in the audience, Glenn Snyder. Put your hand up. Glenn is the other co-founder of Red 6. Round of applause for Glenn. So Glenn had done the most amazing stuff in virtual reality back in 2015. What he did is he took 2 race cars, put them on 2 separate racetracks at the same time, put real race car drivers in them, connected them together in a virtual world, which was a volcanic molten ash world. So both drivers put helmets on, met each other in the virtual world, even though they were in different locations, and no kidding, raced real race cars, completely blind to the outside world against each other. And when I met Glenn in my hangar, the light bulb moment went off. And I think I called Wink up and said, "Hey, Wink, I've solved all of your problems." He said, "Is it true?" I said, "Yeah, it was a PowerPoint, right, at the time." But so Wink's been back. But I said to Glenn, I asked Glenn 2 questions, like, "Hey, Glenn, that's amazing. Can we do that in airplanes?" And Glenn looked at me and scratched my head. He said, "Technically," he goes, "well, we need an airplane, and we need someone stupid enough to try this in an airplane. Do you know anyone?" I was like, "Well, I happen to be building an airplane. I'm pretty stupid." So, off we went, and we started that experimentation in terms of how we thought we would approach it from a technical perspective in an airplane. The next question I asked Glenn, obviously, is no one's going to allow fighter pilots to fly around blind to the outside world in virtual reality. So can we do that in augmented reality, Glenn? And Glenn looked at me like I was an idiot and said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because augmented reality doesn't work outdoors or in dynamic environments." So the cliff notes are, we solved how to do it. We pitched that to Wink, AFRL, and AFWorks kind of backed us, and we started on a journey, a 3-year journey to build this system, ATARS. So what is ATARS? ATARS is a hardware-software combination that allows real pilots in real airplanes to go up in the sky, drop down into a visor system that we've created, which are custom-built optics, which are absolutely necessary for this to work, and look out of the window and see virtual airplanes up in the sky whilst they're physically flying real airplanes. It is absolutely incredible to behold. What does that mean? It means, let me give you an example. If you want to send a young kid to a KC-46 that's never tanked or air-to-air refueled before in their life, you can send them up to a virtual KC-46. And it looks and feels and acts just like a real KC-46. You can pull up onto the wing, you can drop in behind, you can see the boom, you can see the colors of the boom, you can see the director lights, it's so accurate. Up, down, backwards and forwards, the lights work incredibly accurately. Imagine the training impact for kids that have never been to air-to-air refueling tankers in their lives before. You think about the accident that happened last year and what this technology could have done for that young man. If you want to take T-38s down at ATC and you want to train pilots in close formation or tactical formation or breakaways and rejoins, what would historically take you 2 T-38s, 2 pilots and a student, you can now do with 1 airplane. A student and an instructor in the airplane. 1 airplane, a virtual one out on the wing that's acting like a real wingman, breaking away, allowing you to rejoin, thinking and flying for itself, controlled by artificial intelligence. And for the guys at ACC, and when I talk about Air Force or ACC, interchange with Navy, Marine Corps, Royal Air Force, Royal Australian, I don't care. It's the same thing. We've all got the same problems. But if you want to go do a 2v2, 2 F-22s against 2 J-20s, well, first of all, you can't simulate J-20s. So let's assume we're going to use the 22s to simulate J-20s. What would cost you? 4 F-22s, 4 pilots, to the combined cost of roughly $400,000 for every flight hour you put up there. What if I told you you could do that now with 1 F-22 and 1 pilot? And I can put a virtual wingman on your wing that is making tactical decisions that are far better than the ones I ever made. And you can go to the merge against 2 J-20s, and they're operating together, driven by artificial intelligence, making ACM decisions and BFM decisions that will make your eyes water. They're shooting back at you, they're taking shots across the circle. You're doing free and engaged maneuvering. And what if I told you you could do this in a non-permissive environment? That is, look out of the window, and now you've got surface-to-air missiles coming up at you as well, which you can physically see. You can see the smoke, you can see the explosions, you can see the plumes, you can avoid and defeat them. That is what ATARS does, and it's working beautifully. ATARS is the gateway to an augmented world. And with it, I believe we've ushered in a fundamentally new paradigm in how we are going to train in the future. That's what we've been talking about for the last 3 years. I'm sure you've read all about us. It's great to see you all here and listen to this. But that's not what we've been building. You see, the vision that sits behind ATARS is much, much bigger than everything I've just described. Because if ATARS is the gateway to the augmented world, Carbon is the architecture that defines the behavior and the interaction within that world itself. Carbon stands for the Common Augmented Reality Battlespace Operational Network, and yes, we worked really hard to get that into the title, but we like the word carbon, so we had to make it fit. So that's what it does. What is carbon? Well, what if I told you, guys, that carbon is the world's first military metaverse, right? Carbon is a combination of hardware, software, computing power, gateways, APIs, a network, virtual entities, assets that you can interact with. Sound familiar? By Matthew Ball's definition, this is the metaverse, and it's working. What does it do? It's akin to the world's first multiplayer video game played outdoors. Because we don't go up in the environment and train as a singleton. And everything I just told you about of ATARS is fantastic. But what if now I could start to link players in space? What if we could put 2 ships and 3 ships and 4 ships up there, and we could go prosecute missions together in a combined augmented world? Carbon is capable of ingesting all existing LVC systems, and when they enter within visual range, rendering a common visual picture of the battle space. And that's what we've been building. The other aspects of this are, when we say geographical offsets, we can do some really cool stuff. So with LVC, the V component, imagine having a pilot in a simulator on the ground right now, beamed up into the airspace like we described, and you can look down on the radar scope and see them. But when they enter within visual range now, what if I told you that the pilot in the airplane up in the sky can see them? So think about that. Someone in a simulator on the ground, up in the sky, flying an avatar of themselves that the pilot in the real airplane can see and BFN against, and you can maneuver against. Carbon offers that. And to do that, the tracking solution and the way we solve augmented reality outdoors has to be extremely, extremely accurate. And that also affords us some other interesting opportunities, because that affords us the ability to take Carbon and elicit a data set from the pilot that we can then transpose to the debrief. And when we take that data set by tracking the pilot, put it into the debrief, it allows us to refly that sortie now in 3 dimensions. That is to say, if you want to fly it in virtual reality or augmented reality on the ground, you can fly the exact mission. You can be POV, pilot's point of view, you can be God's eye mode, it doesn't matter. But in the debrief now, the level of analysis we're able to do in 3 dimensions in the debrief allows us to conduct contributing factors and root cause analysis, the likes of which we've never been able to do before, absolutely objectively. And that data set is of paramount importance to us. That data set is incredibly valuable. That data set informs some fundamental decisions, as fundamental as what makes a good fighter pilot. You see, Carbon is not really about AR in the same way that we argued right at the beginning that the metaverse is not about augmented reality. Carbon is about data. Carbon is about metadata. Carbon is about a ton of data. Carbon is, quite literally, the military metaverse. And it's working, and we've built it right now. So where do we go from here? We have an existential problem. And there is no point, whichever service you're in denying it. We are never, ever going to solve this problem using physical assets and pilots in the real space. We need to be way smarter than that, and the answer to that is we have to embrace technology. We need a big, bold vision. And I put it to you that the big, bold vision we need is not an LVC strategy. It's not a synthetic training strategy. It is a much broader, much bigger vision of a military metaverse. And the LVC components are critical components to that. Don't get me wrong. But LVC right now should not be employed, in my opinion, without demanding a within visual range solution to the problem as well. It did not happen. We didn't exist 3 years ago. It does exist now. So from a policy, requirements, and dollars perspective, we should be applying all to demand that we have a within visual range capability for any LVC offering, whichever service we're in. The next question on what is the right amount of synthetic training to have? How much of my red air provision should I be providing through synthetic training? Well, respectfully, and I say that Ricky Bobby style, T-Mac, I say respectfully, it's the wrong question to ask. Because the answer to that, in my opinion, is all of it. The technology is getting so good so quickly that I contend that every time you put a fighter pilot or a tanker pilot or a helicopter pilot up into the airspace, they should be training to do what they would be doing for real life. That is being blue air. We can provide red air with synthetics. It's coming. The technology is coming, and it's coming really quickly. So to say how much of my training should be synthetic is to fly a pursuit curve. Or in the ice hockey analogy, we're chasing the puck around the ice ring. We need to be way smarter than that, guys. We need to think much bigger than that, and we need to be lead turning this. We need to be lead turning this on a massive gross correction. We need to be thinking about a comprehensive metaverse strategy incorporating all of the LVC systems, all of the data systems, AI systems, and AR systems to come together with an overall solution. Final word on culture. We talked about where innovation comes from earlier in the presentation, right? It's coming from non-traditional defense primes. We must reform how we procure, how we write requirements to be able to keep pace with small companies that are going at the speed of heat. Programs like AFWorks and the CIBR programs are fantastic, but they don't go far enough. And to take companies from a CIBR phase 1, CIBR phase 2, if you're really lucky, to a CIBR phase 3, and then leave them in the wind looking for customers and looking for requirements is absolutely reckless at best. And it's immoral at worst. Because the guys on this side of the fence, we're taking a ton of risk. Tons of risk. Years of our lives, years of sweat equity, and a ton of investor money to develop stuff for the military that ultimately we need to be seen employed. So I put it to you that if we are going to take companies through the CIBR process, and they are going to get to the end, let's make it a part of a comprehensive strategy. Identify the technologies we need, identify the best-in-class companies out there, and give them a route to success. It's of fundamental importance. I'm going to close by stating this. The metaverse allows us and will allow us to train, and I'm going to use pilots, but pick your domain, more pilots to a much higher standard at a fraction of the cost of what we've been able to do so far. This, I contend, is the solution to all of our problems. Mark Zuckerberg is about to put tens of billions of dollars into creating the commercial version or the consumer version of the metaverse. The message for you is little old Red 6 with $13 million over the last 2 years and a bunch more in the pipeline for the next few years, we've already built it for the military. And this is not a dream, this is actually working. And we're going to be hosting a carbon conference in the summer of this year, around June this year in Santa Monica. So if you guys get the opportunity, come out to see us. We'll put you in the airplane. You get to meet my dog, and we'll take you flying. Guys, I'm going to leave now by showing you one video that I promised you right at the beginning of this presentation. This is the first time anyone's ever seen this. I will say that we've pulled this together just in time to show you conceptually what it is we're doing. But the test pilot was T-Mac. Raise your hand. Just to caveat what you're about to see. T-Mac was flying this with an iPhone stuffed up inside of the visor, filming and then holding a visor with his thumb at the same time. So there's a little bit of wobble in this, there's a little bit of jitter, but I don't care. This is raw stuff. It's not rendered. So it's not BS. It's real stuff. But if you come see and fly this, you're going to see this working, and it's pretty incredible. Thank you. I got two more things to say. Firstly, we're in booth 1922, where we're doing a ground demo fly along where you can actually come in and fly this sortie yourself, and you'll actually see it stable without T-Max fat thumbs moving it around a bunch. So come down to 1922. Secondly, I want to give a massive congratulations and thank you to my team, especially Glenn Snyder, my co-founder, because yesterday Popular Science just awarded ATARS the best innovation in aerospace for 2021. So if we can all give Glenn and the tech team a massive round of applause, that would be awesome. Thank you, Glenn. Guys, that's all I've got. Thank you so much for your time. I'm probably sure I've run over a little bit, but my apologies. Hope we're good. Thank you, everyone.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Will Roper, Red 6 Advisory Board Member, to the stage.
Well, there's no way to follow that. But it's worth being here just to see what the future may look like. And I suspect that the future is going to look like that for things outside the military as well. We're living in a future where everything is digitizing. I want to talk about that. But first I want to plant a question that we're going to come back to at the end, which are what does history say are indicative of the next big thing? So I want to try to answer that question in this talk, and it's something that I have become more and more convinced of as I've gone through my career, a career where I've often been asked to look for big things for the military. So let's answer that question today, and it may put a little more context about why the future is exceptionally exciting, but also exceptionally scary. So as I look at the future of military competition, especially for the US versus China, I think we typically miss how big the landscape for the competition is. It's very easy when you sit in the Pentagon day to day to upload yourself already in the fight, to talk about your capabilities and their capabilities and where you have strengths and where you have weaknesses. And that takes you to gaps, and then that takes you to requirements, and then that takes you to future programs. And future programs are kind of like solving a math equation, and you can put a box around the answer and we all feel better about the future, and then we go home. But that is based on a lot of assumptions that are no longer true. And I wish this was more broadly known. But I have never been in a meeting in my government career where we actually talked about what I'm about to discuss with you. The process that we still have, which is inherited from the Cold War, and don't listen to people who say that the process is broken, it did win the Cold War. So, remind ourselves that it did produce the military we have today, and if you don't like it, well, which other military would you like to switch to? It's actually antiquated. It's just a thing that doesn't make sense today because all the boundary conditions that were true when the Cold War was going on are no longer true today. So take yourself way back then, that's before my time, but from talking with people who helped win the Cold War, that was a time when technology was slow, it was expensive, it was exceptionally difficult. And as Dan alluded to, much of it driven by military funding. Only military funding, the US military, foreign militaries, nation states had the ability and the currency to generate new changing technologies. And that was still during a time when computerization was hard. Here we're showing ourselves taking computers and augmented reality and a metaverse into fast-moving fighters. That was a period, though, when the computers themselves in the fighters were hard. Getting from the big box to something that was ruggedized, that could go on a platform, was just as challenging as doing the weapon systems or doing the stealth. And so any time a technological breakthrough was had, the right answer was to go buy a lot of it and to yield that advantage over your adversary, because in buying a lot of it, it was the only way at the time that you could really drive down the unit cost. And so the procurement system that we have today runs on that principle. Runs on the principle that the government needs to create its own technology, that the leap aheads will be few and far between, that when they're had, there is an implicit assumption that the technology leap ahead will be exclusive to the country that birthed it, and that once you've got that exclusive leap ahead advantage, you need to get it into the field at scale, mass produced, because the next leap ahead is not happening anytime soon. But if you look at what the US government, particularly the military, accomplished during the Cold War, it was so much more than winning the Cold War. If you never thought about it this way, you really should. All of the technologies that have led to the Internet of Things, to the information revolution, were birthed under military R&D. Right? The military was working in microprocessors before the Apples of the world existed. The military was working in satellites, the internet itself, high-gain antennas. Everything that you see today was on a path for military competition, but it kept going. Price point came down, ubiquity went up, and it led to an industrial revolution that the US and its allies and partners got the benefit of. Right? The fact that we generated Silicon Valley, the information age in this country, has given us innumerable soft power benefits and many hard power benefits. So let's go back to that implicit assumption that is wrong in the way the Pentagon does business today, is it begins the process of a gap to a requirement to a program, assuming it has an industrial base that is capable of meeting them, and implicit in that is one that is world leading, so that the counter solution in an adversary is not superior. That has been true for all that are here from defense industry. You have given us the military that we have today, and we should be grateful for it. But the way that we continue doing business in this country with respect to military programs has done something that you could see beginning at the end of the Cold War, the consolidation of the industrial base, because programs that are so few and far between don't allow you to be specialized anymore. You have to be generalized, because it may be an aircraft program this year, and then a ship program the next year, and then a helicopter program and a satellite program. So to make it in defense industry, you had to be a generalist, be pretty good at everything. But we all know that when you're trying to be pretty good at everything, you can't be the very best at anything, because that requires focus and dedication. We really need a little bit of both. The consolidation of the industrial base has done something that if we continue to allow it to go, we will lose. We'll not need to ever look at a war game again or a war plan or analysis. The trend says we'll lose simply because we are continuing to sow in the same soil again and again, trying to recreate the same military we had before, but better, and assuming that that will be sufficient. And it won't be, and here's why. Technology being expensive, being exclusive, that's over. The technologies that are changing the world are commercial in nature. We all know this. I was just reading yesterday about xenobots, right? These organic robots that can replicate themselves, right? That sounds scary. Who knows what the implications are for the future? That's not being generated under military funding. AI is not being driven under military funding. Quantum is not being driven under military funding. So the assumption that we're going to have these technology exclusivity advantages is a dumb assumption. Technology is going to be available to almost everyone. And the militaries that will win by being the most agile in adapting them to their purposes and getting them to the field. And it'll never end. There'll be another breakthrough and another breakthrough. So that's the future we live in. It's not about inventing a better military. It's about continuing to adapt technology from the ecosystem around us and having an iterative, updating military whose advantages are much shorter lived. Right? That's fundamentally opposed to the way the system works today. And I'm fearful for that. My time in government, I tried everything in my power to bring agility in. And agility is something your adversary can't steal, but you can never take a day off. Because just like playing speed chess, any lapse in time or imagination may be to your opponent's advantage from which you don't recover. So as I step back and I look at the technologies that are coming from from the commercial world, and I'm asking myself, what's the next big thing? No one really knows, but I'm going to give you one hypothesis that I think is going to be true. I think that the next industrial revolution is here, and I'm not the only one. Fourth industrial revolution is becoming a common term. So we've had the last one, we got the benefit of it, and we've lived in an era of unrivaled prosperity in the US. The next one appears to be here, and it combines a few things. It combines the ability to digitally design and digitally produce, this digital twin, digital thread concept, which brings the R&D cycle much, much closer, much more iterative. And of course, if you couple that with advanced manufacturing and 3D printing, now you can bring that much shorter iterative design cycle closer to a fast manufacturing process that doesn't have to mass produce. Uh-oh, we have a procurement system that likes to mass produce. You pull those two things together, you bring in ubiquitous software and a metaverse of data, and you effectively have a digital reality. Now, it's not going to be like the Matrix. I'm sure we're all excited to see that on the 22nd. It's not going to be quite to that level, but something that feels like a real digital reality is nearly here. And many predict, and I'm among them, that whatever nation can catalyze that first for their industrial base is going to win the charge to the next industrial revolution, which you can already see setting up the revolution beyond it, where the mechanization of biology that I've already mentioned and quantum will come in, and AI, but it'll be built on a digital foundation because on top of that, these new technologies can be unleashed. So it would appear to me that competing with China is less about building a better military now in the old way. It's not about building better systems against them. We have to fundamentally change the way we build and make the system better. And so how can that be done, and how does any of the technology that we've seen here play into it? One, if it's digital in nature, we should embrace it. We should embrace it because it's going to speed everything up. Now I'm going to answer that question I threw out at the beginning. What are the technologies that history indicates are the most disruptive? They're the technologies that actually make other technologies, things that would have been impossible before or complex before, possible. They're technologies that speed things up. You can see that, right, in the birth of the Internet of Things and AI, that this is a technology that's created other technologies. History says whenever these appear, whoever sees the vision is going to set the terms for the next future. And I'm fearful that this country does not have the vision. We will not set the terms. And that our children and grandchildren will grow up in an era thinking about the preeminence of another country and being taught in history about a past epoch where we were preeminent. Now I want to tie back to what Dan showed in his video. Now, we've always had a safe, comfortable blanket in the military, and I've been in many discussions where conversations have ended on, well, even if that happens, we have the human advantage. We have the experience advantage. We've been fighting for decades. We have systems no one else has. We'll win on the human factor. And for most of human history, that's been true. You can't artificially or digitally create experience. And I think now you can see that's changing. That the ability to train not just in yesterday's tactics, but future tactics and things that don't even exist today, tactics with artificial intelligence and people cooperating together, that is now here. That is now possible today. Experience can be accelerated. Learning curve can be accelerated. So an adversary like China that has the vision and that sees our traditional experience advantage may very well undercut it with digital experience. And that's what I fear the most, is that here is a technology that appears to accelerate other things. And I'm afraid that we will lack the vision to harness it. I think we only have a small window of time, folks. I do everything in my power, in any role that I'm in, to try to help make our future brighter and give our military an advantage. For this digital confluence coming together, digital engineering, digital production, and now digital experience, We have to harness these, or we will find ourselves marooned on an island that is left in a backwater of time. And as a father of a newborn daughter, I want a future for her where she still gets the advantages that I have grown up with in this country. So I would ask everyone here, do everything in your power to help us win. Be urgent, be vocal, and don't let a day go by where you're not fighting for our future. It's worth fighting for. Thanks for your time and attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, next is Dave Rhodes, Senior Vice President and General Manager for Unity Software.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking Bob and SAIC for having us here today. We're grateful. I also want to thank those of you who are in service today or the veterans in the audience. I'm grateful for your service and really proud to be here and in front of you today. So I'm going to start with a question. You see me over here. I'm going to start with a question and give you some framing. A very large prediction was made in 1995 around some technology innovation that would spectacularly supernova and within a year fizzle out as just another fad. Can anybody remember, or do you want to take a guess on what that innovation was? Email. Who said the internet? Okay, very good. That's right. You're correct. Robert Metcalfe, the co-inventor of Ethernet, made this prediction in 1995. Legend be told, 2 years later, he took this quote, put it on a piece of paper, put it in a blender, and literally ate his own words. Okay? Check me on that. It's on a wiki and Reddit, but I don't know. I think it's true. Now, Robert isn't the first guy to be wrong. The bankers in the early 1900s thought Henry Ford was crazy, that nobody would ever buy cars in mass. Film studios have time and time and time again told us that television was not the medium of choice. And in fact, I would suggest to you that most of those film studios today are owned by multimedia conglomerates that get most of their money streaming content to our TVs and mobile devices. Now, this is my favorite one because I was getting my undergrad at the time, programming on a PDP-11, writing machine code, when Ken Olsen, then the CEO of Digital Equipment, said, there's no chance that anybody is ever going to want or need a personal computer in their home. Okay? Now, it's not that any of these people were not smart. They were all brilliant. The key point here, though, is especially as new high innovation trends start to become apparent, it's really, really, really hard to imagine the magnitude of the impact that they can make on our society. Now, what do you want to talk about next? What's next? Starts with an M. It's already been covered twice. The Metaverse. Are you tired of talking about it yet? Do you know what it is? I think you're right. I think we could all line up and talk about the definition, and for as many of us as there are in the room, we'd all have a different view. Now, there's a lot of words here, and I'm not going to try and give you my vision of what the internet, what the metaverse is today. I think that the point made by my friend and colleague at Unity that I wanted to bring out is the fact that we don't really know what incarnation the metaverse is ultimately going to take. It's probably not going to be this dystopian view of the future where none of us are physically together anymore and we interact in different ways purely virtually. But what does matter, similar to what my other colleagues have suggested, is that it will be digital in nature. It will be global in nature. It will be spatially enabled. It will connect the digital world and the physical world together with massive amounts of metadata. And it has just the same kind of potential to make a profound impact on our world as the other four inventions that we saw earlier. Okay? Now, I'd suggest to you that the hot topic of Metaverse and some of the things that you've heard about by my other two speakers here, the path to getting there is accelerating at an extremely rapid pace. Now, what's going on? Well, first and foremost, multi-threaded, high-power GPUs available via the cloud and the edge, despite Moore's law leveling out, are giving us massive amounts of compute power at our disposal on every device that we have. Both wireline and wireless networking is moving petabytes of data all around the world in splits of seconds with very low latency. Things that are typically not handled well in terms of complexity by us as human beings are being managed and driven by machine learning agents in complex environments. And what we've seen in the last 18 months or so at Unity is this has also been accelerated due to COVID-19. Our social distancing, our isolation, yet our need to still get work done, get entertained, collaborate, learn, stayed the same. In fact, our hunger for it grew while we were isolated. And so all these things have come together in really an enabling technology for the metaverse that we call real-time 3D. Now, there may be as many definitions for real-time 3D as there are the metaverse, but for us what it means is digital experiences that are immersive, hyper-realistic, connected to the physical world. They run on all kinds of devices. They take all kinds of inputs. And you want to see an example, go to the Red 6 booth. You saw the video, go see it. It's freaking amazing, okay? And these experiences are transforming every aspect of our world. I'm not kidding you. I've been at Unity for 5 years, and I would humbly say, with 100% humbleness, I saw the metaverse 5 years ago because I saw a developer community in the public sector and the private sector building little pieces of the metaverse one day at a time. And for 5 years, every week, I see it. Now, the public sector, this isn't really news, I don't think, because if you walk the show floor or if you sit down with some of our partners at the agencies, you're solving tough problems today with real-time 3D. Mission planning is a great example. Putting immersive experiences together, powered by humans and machine learning agents to better drive mission outcomes, to better prepare our warfighters and our protective forces from to ensure they make their mission complete successfully. We're seeing the government in the public sector on the civilian side, agencies like the GSA use massive amounts of 3D information that they use to manage their portfolio and drive it through the operation and maintenance process to run buildings in a cleaner way, to be more sustainable, to drive down costs. We see here on the show floor a massive amount of interactive training exercises and guidance exercises where we're solving all kinds of things from mental health for our soldiers all the way to training new vocations on new pieces of equipment that are highly complex, but we need to be able to maintain and improve our operational capability when we're under pressure. So you're doing it. The private sector has also embraced real-time 3D. Massive amounts of synthetic data sets are being generated to train robots, to train all kinds of autonomous objects so that they can function out in the wild and not go rogue. Workforces are also being trained through real-time 3D. One of your system integrator partners told me last night at dinner that every one of their new recruits that comes in the door goes through their entire onboarding process virtually with a headset. And the productivity of those new recruits after 3 months is massively higher than those who went through a traditional process. And of course, finally, digital twins are being built at scale. Critical infrastructure buildings, manufacturing lines. Digital twins are everywhere. And what's most exciting is they're being connected to their physical asset counterparts, and they're complex systems that we sometimes are error-prone in driving. Machine learning agents are actually driving efficiencies in the physical plant, better outcomes in the private sector as well. This is one of my favorite examples that we've been using recently. What you're seeing here is a full-scale digital twin of the city of Paris, made by BNP Paribas. 10 million buildings, modeled over a time sequence of 33 years, from 1997 to looking forward to 2030. And what BNP used this for during COVID was to enable their clients to get information on building availability, occupancy rates, physical fly-throughs, model traffic at 5:30 on a Wednesday. If you're trying to get into Paris, you know that's a hellish time to get anywhere in the city. This digital twin has a massive amount of metadata connected to it, so clients could get an understanding around proximity to metro lines or high-quality schooling in the area. And as a result, what BNP was able to do is transact millions and millions of dollars without clients ever having to set foot physically in Paris. Of course, because they couldn't. But that's the power of real-time 3D. Now, we've commissioned a study with Forrester recently, both in the private sector and the public sector, to really get a sense for how quickly real-time 3D is being adopted. 88% of the people that we talk to have either accelerated or gone into full production with immersive experiences because of the impact that it's making. This is a short video. I think it was a prompt for me to talk about the advancements in hardware. Again, Red 6 is a great example at the high end. One of the things that's driving adoption very quickly is the ability to create real-time 3D experiences on all kinds of different form factors. Costs are going down, the size of the form factors are going down, battery life is going up extremely fast, and it's no longer just in headsets. It's every one of our consumer-grade phones is capable of creating and running real-time 3D experiences. Go out on the show floor and see some of the Lightwave technology that is powering some of the immersive real-time 3D tablets at very low cost. So the hardware is there also. So like my colleagues, I would challenge all of you to move fast. Beat your private sector counterparts. Move faster. It's really important because you've got an opportunity to embrace some crazy good technology to significantly improve your mission outcomes. Now, how do you do that? Look, I'm older than I look. I've been fortunate enough to go through 3 major technology transformations in my career in 3 different industries. And it's never, never, ever been about how complex the technology is. It's always been about both the will and the ability to manage change, to set a vision for where you really think you need to be, to get a change management strategy in place where you can find change agents who can think differently about how to take new technology and solve problems in a different way than they have in the past. What always seems to happen is teams take new technology and try and apply it in the same old way. And so the process here, the ability to move fast, is pretty simple. Start by thinking about the key mission outcomes that you need to drive that are not being solved properly by the existing processes. Find some things that lend themselves well to these immersive, interactive, high-fidelity 3D experiences. Also, get control of your data because it has incredible power. And I want to reemphasize 2 things. It's your data. It's your data. It's not any company's data. It's not Unity. It's your data. And so what you've got an opportunity to do with real-time 3D is bring it all together. Bring your geospatial information together. Bring your assets together. Bring your metadata together in one experience. And then if you do that and you focus on these mission outcomes, you unleash the power of that data. Second thing is plan. We talked about change agents and change management. It's really that simple. And finally, act. Pick a small number of POCs, proof of concepts, get your commercial partners together, and go move fast and prove out the outcome that real-time 3D can bring to you. So I'll end with this. Let's not overthink the metaverse. Let's not talk about it too much. Let's not wring our hands about what it might or might not be. We probably all have a lot of definitions. It's the 3D internet. It's the next evolution in the internet. It doesn't matter. What matters are the critical technologies underneath that are powering it. And you as a community, as my predecessors have said, have always leveraged great technology to make major advances that not only kept our world safer and made our world better for the next generations, but also drove innovation in private industry. And I would join my colleagues in just telling you that you've got an opportunity to do that. I'm proud to be here to support you in that effort, and I want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Nathan Thomas, Vice President, Business Development for Unreal Engine.
Hey. Hey, I'm really excited to be here today. I'm standing in for Mark Petit, who sends his apologies, couldn't make it, and really his loss and my win in a lot of ways, because I get to attend my first ITSEC, which has been absolutely phenomenal to get to see what people are doing with Unreal Engine, learn more about this incredible community, and really kind of get the sense of this group that's pulling together to try and solve all of these problems. So it's been very, very exciting, and thank you, Sebastian Lizet and the other folks from Epic for hosting and making this all happen for us. So thank you very much as well, Bob. So it's a little bit strange being from Unreal Engine sometimes at these kinds of things, in the sense, for folks who don't know, Unreal Engine is built by Epic Games. It is the leading, we believe, AAA platform for 3D real-time experiences, focused predominantly in the game space, but having now seen a huge adoption curve across everything on the floor that you see out here, we're seeing uptake. But it's not something that we charge money for this community. So it is something that we're engaging this community because we believe that this community is going to give us the feedback and the growth and the development to improve that engine over time. So Unreal Engine has benefited significantly from that engagement to date, and you're going to continue to see that investment and commitment from Epic Games to this space. One of the things that we take as granted, as a ground truth, is that augmented reality, XR, training and simulation benefits from XR. So immersion ensures training engagement with the results, getting better training. We see the format facilitating better collaboration. I think that's something we've seen a lot over the last couple of years, living through COVID together. The format enables deployments in regions where installations don't exist otherwise, and XR transfers trainees to their training environments and allows for on-demand learning. I won't belabor this too much. I think everybody here probably understands the idea that augmented reality of various types is core to the future of all of these types of training and simulation applications. What I wanted to talk about today mostly, though, is some of the trends that we're seeing when we talk to customers today in this space amongst the simulation community. So we're going to talk a little bit about proliferation of XR. So I think a lot of my co-presenters have spoken a little bit about the fact that this is becoming ubiquitous. It's becoming a major part of the industry. We're going to focus a little bit on the community and open standards and interoperability. And we're going to talk about training built by trainers, and then, of course, a move towards photorealism that we're seeing in the industry. And I want to use this as a catalyst to encourage the folks in this room on these topics. I think there's kind of a call to action for everybody around these that we'll get to towards the end of the presentation. So if you go down to the floor, I think you can see a wide range of technologies that are now consuming and using game technology like Unreal Engine as a core for generating the 3D experiences that you get to interact with. That accessibility has really been absolutely, I think, game-changing for the industry. That proliferation is real, it's happening now. I think there's been a sense in some of the industry that it's a future state, that it's something that will come. But I think when you see what's out here, it's absolutely happening right now, and you should be looking at any case where you can apply XR and feeling comfortable that that is a community, that it's a technology that exists today that can go happen. What we're seeing is a real vibrant ecosystem to develop around it. And we'll get to this in a moment in the openness and standards, but that's super important. That is that you don't need to be out on a limb yourself, that there is in fact a huge group, a lot of whom are in this room, who are building towards these outcomes. The other trend we're really seeing is a push for openness, community, and for standards. And I know a lot of folks here have been involved for many years with standardization and standards in this community, and it's absolutely critical. My own background, I started my career at a company called Red Hat, and we were building an operating system called Linux. And at the time, we didn't really know how that was going to go. We didn't know where that was going to land. It turned out that the power of having an open source operating system, having an open perspective, the community that was focused on that, plus the PC-focused Intel chipset, wound up being this massive disruptor for the server operating system market and the server hardware market. So those traditional entrenched Unix vendors selling RISC hardware were suddenly disrupted by this tiny company from North Carolina, an open source group. But it was because it was open. It was because that the investments that everybody made into that platform continued to pay benefit over time. So that was that we had that advantage of a community working together. I think that's critical for this community. You know, when we hear folks highlighting the risks in our procurement process, the risk in our industrial base, this is not a situation where you can afford to have siloing, where you can afford to have vendor lock-in, where you can afford to be focusing on licensing and instead of focusing on your content, instead of focusing on the applications you're trying to build. As a community, we need to be forcing ourselves to stand on open standards. We need to be working together. When you look at Unreal Engine, of course, we focused on a licensing construct that works for this community, you know, since we made it available in 2014. But I think it also extends to the way that we all talk about formats, open interactions, being able to import and export. All of those things are really critical. And I know it sounds very dull and mundane to get into that, but you know, when you're looking at procurement, when you're looking at design, when you're looking at push, it's really important. And it's something where if we don't do it now, we're going to wind up finding ourselves still in that same siloed world over time. So this power of the community winds up being critical if we all pull together and make sure that that's part of our modus operandi for the future. Another trend we're seeing is the idea of content and training built by trainers. This is a little more forward-looking, but the idea of having to invest as much as we do in creating and iterating content and applications for every use case is a little concerning. And we think that there's a real opportunity to have more iteration happening from the trainers and from the end users for content over time. It's one of the things I think we all have learned in the development community from agile development over the last 20 years, which is that you have a very iterative development process. So you learn from what you've done, you iterate rapidly, you push back out into production. I think very similarly, you'll see a real shift in the gaming side towards user-generated content. So that is, if you look at what the next generation is doing, the folks that will be in your training programs in the next 10 years have been using Roblox, they've been using Fortnite Creative, and they've been using Minecraft, and they're creating their own worlds, and they're used to these concepts. And I know that sounds a little far-fetched, you know, in terms of trying to think about a flight simulator, but what we're seeing is that this technology is getting applied way down below flight simulators as the technologies become less expensive. You've got a whole range of new applications out there for whether they're simulators that are focused in medical or they're focused in combat fighters. You've got a huge opportunity here for that to be evolved more quickly and have that iterative development approach when you look at the content itself. We're also seeing a real trend towards photorealism and seeing real movie quality or AAA game quality imagery showing up inside of the training and simulation space. So we have, I think, a number of trends that are converging to make this happen, I think that have been highlighted. So we've got increased hardware capabilities, we've got lowering cost on those capabilities, and it's sort of a given, I think, that the experience that you can get for immersive learning is stronger if you have a better, higher quality experience inside of that. And so we're seeing that real trend happening. For us, there's a number of different places we see it manifest out on the show floor. I've just got a couple of examples here. This is a shot from a CAE's simulator, so rendered in Unreal Engine as well. And you can see the similar from the Meta NOR simulator. The quality that's getting produced in these simulation environments now is getting to the level of what you'd expect to see in AAA gaming or what you'd expect to see in media and entertainment spaces. And we think that's a trend that will only continue over time as hardware continues to become more capable of doing that, and as we see the push from the creators. Now, we get that same push on the engine side to get to that point, to be able to deliver that level of quality. So one of the places that I wanted to quickly highlight is we've launched a couple of new technologies in the last year or so. We've announced Unreal Engine 5 in public beta, and we've announced MetaHuman Creator. And there are a couple of key technologies I want to highlight from this that really speak to this idea of increased fidelity and experience. So on the Unreal Engine 5, I would highlight Nanite, which is our open world simulation tool. So this lets you have millions of polygons or billions of polygons in meshes and do that in a way that means you don't have to worry about level of detail, down rendering, and thinking about that. You build naturally the environment that you want to have in terms of the experience you want for learners in simulation environments. And you can do that in a way that doesn't require significant additional hardware. And then Lumen is our global illumination system. So this is real-time global illumination, again, not requiring any pre-baking of lighting, so it means that you can be very, very flexible and define the structure you want. MetaHuman Creator is a cloud service we've launched, which lets you generate digital twins, lets you set everything from skin tone, eye colors, facial features, interactions, and then take those digital twins out and use them inside of Unreal Engine in your application. This is pretty critical. Again, when we talk about real high fidelity experiences, there's a fundamental difference between interacting with an NPC, for example, in a medical simulator who has realistic emotional responses and facial features versus something that is not as believable. And so again, we take this as a critical part of the future, is that we have real high fidelity experiences. Now, as these things come together, as we are being more open, as we're coming out with the right set of technologies, we see the applications hitting the market, and that's awesome to see. It's been incredible to see out on the show floor some of the things people are building. So you'll see SkyReal's application here, which is helping on engineering and cutting cycle time down. You'll see the Red 6 up here as well. Thank you, guys. And don't need to retell that story. We've got Precision OS doing work on surgical simulators. We've got the VI WorldSim guys doing work on autonomous car testing before they go into market. We've got the SimCentric folks doing real-time military simulation at a rapid pace. So all very, very cool tech, and just a small subset of what we see out there. It's always fascinating to come and see, and I think, speaking for Seb, it's always they seem very surprised at new things that are popping up all the time with Unreal Engine as we go across the floor, so kind of neat to see what people are coming up with. So I do want to kind of finish with a statement on why are we here and what's our commitment to it. I spoke to this a little bit earlier, but this community is incredibly valuable to us. We believe fundamentally in the future of the metaverse. I don't want to belabor the point. I think we've heard a lot about it. But I think as we think about getting there, Epic and Unreal really have made the clear determination that we want to help creators. We want to help people who are going to be bringing about that future. It's not about generating money for us. It's about going and getting that community to develop that future. And so you'll see the licensing structure is built that way. And this community is clearly at the forefront of that. You're building incredible experiences in 3D. You're going to generate content. You're going to generate open content in a lot of cases. Absolutely want to be a participant in that environment. And I just see a huge amount of excitement coming out of the community. Our commitment is that we want to participate in that, and we will continue to generate the best 3D real-time engine that we can for this community based on that feedback and that engagement. We are going to continue to adhere and focus on open approaches so that we can help you build a broader ecosystem of success. We're going to continue to do funding and be involved in partner programs in this space and try and build out the right set of ecosystem partners to make sure that you've got what you need to be successful. And then, of course, we're going to be here. So we're going to continue to be part of this community and part of the, I think, incredible experience that's put on here at ITSEC every year. So very excited in that sense. Thank you very much.
Well, I was going to try to summarize this, but all I can think of is just wow. So, so what I'd like you all to do is, as you all move out and as we reset this room, but in that time, think about what you heard. Think about how you continue the conversation. Talk amongst each other about what you learned, what it makes you think, and what do we got to do, and what do you got to do to be the catalyst to affect accelerating XR and achieve some of the things you heard here today. So, call to action, you all, is continue this conversation. Let's do this tonight. Please stay around. We're going to reset the room and then come on back in. Thank you all. Appreciate it.